Today we're going to talk about in the beginning God. In the beginning God. Now I realize we live in a world where there are many different views on life, how we got here, where it's all going. And in my teaching that I did on there is no creator God, question mark, really. In that video, I talked about that, which is basically called a worldview. But today, I want to get into, for your consideration, well-established facts, commonly accepted facts from a scientific perspective, without getting bogged down into a lot of philosophical, hypothetical minutiae. So in other words, we want to really put aside for the moment the so-called superintelligence that defies and flies in the face of basic common sense. Now, I know common sense is not so common, but we want to talk about that today. And we want to look at this from a logical, reasonable, and rational thought process. So, as I mentioned in my previous video, it appears that from listening to people talk and reading and observing that this issue of whether or not there's a creator God is not so much a head or a mind issue, but a heart issue. Although it is, to some extent, also a head issue, because it's some things that we grapple with that we can't understand, which is not to be unexpected. But some people just simply do not want to believe, and that's just fine. I mean, that's their prerogative, that's their free will choice. But the consequences of that should be alarming when you think about what that really means. So in my previous message, I talked about in order to not believe in the creator God, you have to totally discount, discredit, or ignore the Bible. So in this video, I want us to use the brain that we have, and we all have a brain, to examine in brief the origin of life, the facts that we know to be true from a scientific perspective. These are not debatable facts of the physical universe, and examine those and in a simple, reasonable, and rational manner. So first of all, let's talk about the Big Bang. The Big Bang is a theory, which by definition means that it's not a proven fact, but yet it's presented as the leading explanation of how life began. You check any scientific website, NASA, space.com, they all tout the Big Bang as the leading explanation of how life began. The Big Bang, let's explain what that is, because I think some people just don't realize what the Big Bang is really saying. It's a belief that the universe, as we know it, is a result of matter that was so dense, it was almost pretty much invisible. And suddenly a mega explosion occurred, giving us this very complex, extremely complex, and intricate life that we see around us. Now think about that for a second. Think about that just for a second. I mean, really think about that. What they're saying is that matter was so dense we could hardly see it, and yet voila, we have this mega explosion and we get this complicated, sophisticated life, particularly the human body, which is amazingly sophisticated, intricate, and complex. And I'm going to get that into my next video. But for right now, I want to talk about the physical aspects of the universe as we know it. Now, these are facts that aren't disputed by people out in the community of science and all the sciences, whether they're believers in the Bible or not. These are undisputable facts. Now, many scientists believe that this Big Bang explosion occurred between 8 and 20 billion years ago. Think about that. That's a big gap between 8 and 20 billion years ago. So they're leaving room for about 12 billion years that are unaccounted for. You know, they throw around numbers out there in astronomy in the billions of years like it's nothing. It's almost like our government in the United States Congress. Used to be years ago, if they talked about millions of dollars, it was a big deal. Now they throw around money like billions of dollars like it's no big deal. If you put out on a plaque, they got charts out there. If you put that on a pallet, $1 million stacked up in $100 bills, and then $1 billion stacked up in $100 bills, and then $1 trillion, it's a huge difference. We have like a $30 trillion national debt in America, which is crazy. It's a huge difference between a million and a billion. But they believe this Big Bang happened about 8 to 20 billion years ago. And they have to get that many years to try to explain evolution, how we got here through evolution. They have to have a huge amount of time to try to explain it, but it's really unexplainable, as we'll see. So then we have assumptions. To accept the Big Bang, we must accept the assumption that matter and energy are eternal. They were always here. They were always here. They were eternal. Now, matter had to be eternal before the Big Bang, or there would have been nothing there to go boom. So what we see here is that everyone on earth believes in something eternal by faith. It's either faith in eternal matter and energy or faith in eternal God. One or the other. It has to be by faith. Why is it by faith? Because it's beyond the reach of science to test. There are no experiments that can test who or what was here when the universe began. So consequently, when we speak of origins, neither creation or the evolution model can be verifiable by reproducible scientific experiments, tests. There's no way to test it. Nobody was here. That takes both out of the realm of science and into the arena of faith. But scientists won't call it what it is. They won't call it faith. But science, by definition, means knowledge. There is no true scientific evidence that is not based on assumptions. Let me repeat that. There is no true scientific evidence that is not based on some assumptions. Scientists do not know. They can only theorize. And the danger with that is countless millions of people will be led to potential eternal separation from the Creator God if they believe in this unprovable theory. Now, again, eternal matter and energy or eternal God, one or the other. God, in his infinite genius, he's designed the creation so that no matter which view of the original life you believe, you come face to face with him. Now, why do I say that? Because if matter and energy were eternal, they would be, by the time of the Big Bang, in a state of equilibrium. What does that mean? That means everything would have been equal and non-active, non-reactive. For example, it'd be like a car that sits parked on the street or your driveway or in front of your house. It doesn't do anything until it's started up. Starting the engine of a vehicle, whatever vehicle you have, it basically explodes the gasoline, a controlled explosion that gives power to move the vehicle. So science tells us that when matter is somewhere long enough in time, eternity past, so to speak, it will eventually stop doing anything and just sit there in neutral, so to speak, like a car parked on the street. That's part of the second law of thermodynamics. So before the Big Bang, all matter and energy, if you believe the Big Bang theory, if eternal, would be in neutral, like a vehicle, just sitting there. It will not move. If everything was in neutral or non-reactive in the Big Bang, what would have made the Big Bang go boom? I mean, think about it. So everyone then believes something by faith. If you believe the Big Bang and eternal matter and energy, you believe by faith that an outside force acted on this matter and energy that's sitting there in neutral, so to speak, to supply the energy necessary to explode it into action. In reality, you come face to face with God. In the beginning, God. The question then becomes, do you believe by faith in eternal matter and energy? Now, this presents another problem. If you do, how did the Big Bang go boom? Either that, or do you believe by faith in eternal God? Everyone believes by faith in something eternal. Now, probably a lot of people don't think about it that way, but you have to believe one or the other was here eternally, always here. The obvious ultimate question then is, where did the matter and energy come from? Where did that come from? How do we know? We know this though. We know if you leave matter and energy to itself long enough, it doesn't organize itself. It's like the example some of you may have heard about. If you leave, all the integral thousands of parts to an airplane in a hangar, just sprued out in a hangar, just there, and all of a sudden somebody throws in some explosive material and it blows up, there's no way it's going to organize into a 747 or a 737 and to a sophisticated plane with all the wiring that goes on. There's just no way. So matter and energy does not organize itself if left to itself. Evolutionists take many necessary steps for granted in their molecules to man model. In other words, they assume that non-living chemicals gave rise to the first living cell, which in turn evolved into ever and ever more complex forms of life. That totally goes against the law of biogenesis. The law of biogenesis basically says that nothing but living life, living cells can create, or you cannot get living cells from non-living cells, non-living things from living things. You can't get living things from non-living things, basically. It's the law, it's biogenesis, they call it. So what they say is that they're creationists, like myself, people that believe in creation, they claim, atheists claim that we say that nothing comes from nothing. We don't say that. We don't say nothing comes from nothing. Atheists reply that we say that, that we claim that, but that's not true. The Bible does not say that God came from nothing. The Word of God declares that God always existed. He is an eternally existing being without beginning or end. Now, I know very well that the mere thought of that is far beyond the ability of any of us to really comprehend. We simply do not have the mental capacity to even remotely get anywhere close to understanding that. And God does not expect us to understand it. And as I indicated in one of my previous messages, it's a matter of faith. The way God puts it in the Bible is Hebrews 11:6. But without faith, it is impossible to please God. So he doesn't require us to understand it. We could never understand that. How could he have always been and always will be? I thought about that when I first became a Christian. I was like, how could that be? Well, we don't know how that could be. But let's talk about this for a moment. The anthropic principle. The anthropic principle. What is that? For our lives to be maintained here on this planet, we must have the exact correct amount of oxygen, hydrogen, carbon dioxide, sunlight, gravity, speed of rotation of the earth, the revolution of the earth, the distance from the moon, the sun, water, gravity, etc., etc., etc. We have to have those things in exact amounts in order for us to live on this planet. All these factors must be in correct amounts, in the right places, at the right times, and in the exact relationships to each other. For instance, our Earth's gravity, if it was any weaker, our atmosphere would thin out and be unable to support life. If gravity was stronger, we would get undesirable gases that they would be held in higher concentrations. It would be very detrimental to our health. That means our Earth must have been made exactly the right size to generate the perfect amount of gravity to support our atmosphere. It also had to be the right size to hold our moon in orbit. That means the moon had to be the right size so it wouldn't drift off into space or crash into the earth. Furthermore, it had to be the right size so that the ocean tides stay under control. If the moon was any closer, we would have massive flooding on this planet. If it was any further away, we would have stagnation on all the water bodies. We couldn't survive. So there are many other arguments and facts we could sprue out. A bunch of them, a lot more. But the point is that the arguments about evolution are so flawed, it would be almost laughable if it wasn't so deadly and sad. The anthropic principle states that the overwhelming scientific evidence demonstrates that the precise design and the finely balanced fundamental forces governing our universe argue persuasively that our universe was designed by a supernatural intelligence, namely God. Then they won't call it God, but they realize there's got to be some super intelligence behind this, but they don't want to go out on a limb and call it and say it's God. Either that, or there is an infinity. Now think about this. Either that, either it was created by by a super intelligent being by design, or there's been an infinity of universes, that don't support life, and we just happen to exist in the only one that does. Think about that. What are the odds of that? They're astronomical. Now, a lot of astronomers and people are realizing that the evidence is so compelling that our universe could not possibly have come into existence by chance alone, just by random chance. It's too much order, too much sophistication, too much complexity. It's just ludicrous to think that it just happened. So which position sounds the much more rational, and reasonable to have occurred? There is an innumerable amount of evidence, incontrovertible facts that support this regarding the universe and how we got here. Suffice it to say, it is indisputable scientific evidence that the Creator God of the Bible is the only reasonable, logical, and rational explanation for the existence of all that we see and experience around us. Now, the Bible spoke first. The Bible is never subject to science, but science is always subject to the Bible. Why? Because the Bible spoke first. The Bible was written thousands of years before any of these scientific discoveries were made. And as time goes on, there are more and more archaeological findings and other sciences that confirm what was already stated in the Bible thousands of years ago. So clearly the Bible supersedes and is far more advanced in the knowledge of the universe as well as life here on earth than all the sciences combined. Why? Because God divinely inspired the writings of the Bible. He is infinite in his knowledge, and we are finite in ours. The Bible, although written thousands of years ago, contains numerous scientific accurate statements that are impossible to explain apart from the scriptures. The Bible is not a scientific textbook, but wherever scriptures do include statements about scientific matters, these statements written thousands of years ago, they are stunningly accurate. How could the writers of the scriptures possibly know these scientific facts? The first book of the Bible, the Genesis, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. Now, until about 1950, most scientists believed some variation of the steady state theory, which basically suggested that the universe had always existed as we observe it today, had no beginning. Most scientists believe that. This theory totally contradicted the Word of God, which recorded that in the beginning, God created everything in the distant past. Now, new discoveries in the fields of astronomy and astrophysics since 1930 actually have forced most in the scientific community to change. They now show that there's evidence to support a definite beginning of creation, or from one point in time. There's a Nobel Science winner Nobel Prize winner from Cambridge University, and other smart people who study these things say there's overwhelming evidence that supports the biblical position that the universe was definitely created at some point in time. One physicist from MIT noted that the exquisite order displayed by our scientific understanding of the physical world calls for the divine. Whoa, God. But most of them don't want to go there. The evidence from nature and the extraordinary scientific discoveries of atom and DNA, and I'll get into DNA in the next video, it reveals meticulous, intelligent design. Meticulous. The DNA in our body is amazing. If there is a clear evidence of design, which there is, then obviously there had to be a designer. Everything we see around us, I mean everything, the clothes you have on, the homes we live in, the vehicles we drive, the computer you're watching right now, on your laptop or on your phone, had to be designed by somebody. I mean, this is pretty simple stuff. It didn't just pop into it. This is like, voila, it's here. It had to be designed by somebody. It doesn't get any simpler than that. So what you choose to believe is eternally important. Based on overwhelming evidence that we have and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's much more out there we could get into. But any reasonable, rational thinking person would conclude that the life we see around us had to be created by a far superior supernatural intelligence. And I'm not talking about aliens from another planet, although there are some people out there, and these are scientific people who are very well educated with degrees. In fact, one of the gentlemen who was a co-founder of DNA made a comment about what he thought, and it basically touched on this creation from aliens on another planet, which is, it's ridiculous to think that. The Bible tells us that everyone knows the Creator God exists, but some choose to suppress or hold down that knowledge. Don't let that be you. Romans 1:18-20 says this: "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, of people who suppress, they hold the truth down in unrighteousness." Because, why? Why would God be angry about that? Because that which is known about God is evident to them, because God made it evident to them, to us. Well, how did he make it evident to us? The 20th verse says this real clear. This is what I've been talking about in this whole message. Since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and Godhead, divine nature, has been clearly seen, clearly perceived, being understood by the things that are made, so that we are without excuse. We are without excuse. Humankind, we are out of excuse. Thank you for listening, and have a blessed day.